Welcome to CIS 579, Technology of E-Business. This is Dr. Schuessler, and today we're going to cover Chapter 10, Electronic Commerce Payment Systems. The learning objectives for this chapter include understanding the shifts that are occurring with regard to online payments. We'll discuss the players and processes involved in using credit cards online. We'll talk about the different categories and potential uses of smart cards. We're going to discuss stored value cards and identify under what circumstances they are best used. After reading this chapter, you should be able to describe the situations where e-micropayments are used and the alternative ways for handling these situations. You should be able to describe the processes and parties involved in e-checking. You'll understand the major types of mobile payments. And lastly, you'll be able to describe methods in B2B e-commerce, including payments for global trade. In one sense, e-commerce is no different than any other business. The goal is to make money, and to be able to make money, we have to be able to conduct transactions. The book in section 10.1 talks about the payment revolution, and it starts out by talking about the fact that credit cards and debit card purchases passed the use of cash and checks as a form of payment for the first time in 2003, and that trend has continued, moving more and more away from cash and checks and more towards credit card and debit cards. Similar trends have occurred with non-cash payments for recurring bills as well. For decades, people have talked about this concept or this idea of a cashless society, but the reality is it's probably never going to go away, or at least not for the foreseeable future, that we truly have a cashless society. But at the same time, we have to recognize the overwhelming popularity of the use of credit and debit cards. For online B2C merchants, the implications of these trends are pretty straightforward. In most countries, it's hard for an online business to run without supporting credit card payments and other forms of electronic payments, despite the costs that are associated with those types of payments. There's some critical factors that come into play in determining whether a particular method of e-payment achieves critical mass, and this slide illustrates some of those: independence, interoperability and portability, security, how safe is the transfer, anonymity, divisibility, etc. Independent really talks about the idea that there's sometimes special software or hardware devices that are associated both with the seller and the buyer. And for an electronic system to be successful, ideally you won't require the payer to install any kind of specialized components. If they have to, that form of payment is less likely to succeed. In terms of interoperability and portability, an e-payment method must mesh with existing systems and applications to be supported by standard computing platforms. In other words, if you need specialized hardware or software, they're less likely to succeed as well. As far as anonymity, some people just prefer cash. They like the privacy that it gives them, and you lose that when you use credit cards and debit cards and things of that nature. So for those individuals, special payment methods such as eCash really have to continue to be used or continue to be developed. Divisibility, basically we're trying to address any method that can address the lower or higher end of the price continuum. In other words, some payment systems don't allow for extremely high purchase or high dollar purchases or extremely low dollar purchases. So for an e-payment system to be effective and efficient, ideally it would be able to go to the very extremes, both at the high end and the low end. Ease of use is almost always a big deal. The transaction fees, which are associated with credit card purchases, the lower we can get those fees, the more likely a payment system is to be successful. As we become more and more connected globally, there are various our customers as well as our suppliers open up. We need the ability to conduct transactions in a global environment, so those systems that are able to do that are going to be more successful. And then lastly, regulations. There's a lot of federal, state, and local regulations that are in play, and those that are able to navigate those waters, again, are going to be more successful. So essentially there are three types of payment cards: credit cards, charge cards, and debit cards. A payment card is an electronic card that contains information that can be used for payment purposes. The first type, credit cards, are ones in which credit is actually extended. In other words, you make a purchase on a credit card and the bank is actually loaning you money for that purchase. Obviously, the terms are different from credit card to credit card, but in most cases, if you pay that credit card off at the end of the month, there's no charges, finance charges associated with those purchases. You're in good shape. You've essentially borrowed that money for free. Otherwise, if you make the minimum payment or fail to make a payment, you have late fees and finance charges and so on. Charge cards are similar, except that rather than simply having a minimum fee, the entire balance is due at the end of the cycle. In other words, you have to pay off the entire balance every time. They're still loaning you that money, but you have to make that payment every in full each cycle. Debit cards operate just a little bit differently. They are the transactions are run like they are for credit cards, but the money is coming directly out of your bank account. In other words, the funds already have to be there in that account for you to be able to make a purchase. Regardless of which type of the three cards that we use for an e-purchase, the processing card payment basically is going to go through two major phases: authorization and settlement. Authorization is going to allow us to determine whether a buyer's card is active and whether the customer has sufficient available credit or funds. Settlement involves the transfer of money from the buyers to the merchant's account. There are also three basic configurations for processing online payments. The e-commerce merchant may either own the payment software itself. In other words, a merchant can purchase payment processing modules and integrate with other e-commerce software. They can use a point-of-sale operator by an acquirer. In this situation or this setup, a merchant can redirect cardholders to a point-of-sale system run by an acquirer, and the point-of-sale handles the complete payment process and directs the cardholder back to the merchant site once payment is complete. The last approach is to use a point-of-sale operated by a payment service provider. Merchants can rely on servers operated by third parties known as payment service providers. In this case, the payment service provider connects with the appropriate acquirers, and point-of-sale providers must be registered with the various card associations they represent or support. Unfortunately, dealing in online purchases requires people to necessarily not conduct transactions face to face. You don't see the people that you're doing business with. So this leads to obviously fraud issues or potential fraud issues. And as a result, there's a number of tools or techniques that have been developed to be able to try to address some of these problems. One of which is the use of address verification. Address verification is used by approximately 80% of all merchants. And basically the idea is that it compares the address on an order to the address on file with a credit card company or card company. And this is a fairly effective and easy technique to use. Unfortunately, sometimes it results in false positives as users end up moving or they end up entering an incorrect address or something of that nature. Another technique is manual review. In 2010, over 70% of all merchants used the manual review method, which relies on staff to manually review suspicious orders. For small merchants, that may not be a big deal. For a small number of orders, a small number of customers, it's not a big deal, but it's not a particularly scalable solution. So it has certain limitations. As a result, a lot of merchants have substantially reduced the percentage of orders that they're manually reviewing. Still, other techniques to detect fraudulent transactions include fraud screens and automated decision models. These are based on automated rules that determine whether a transaction should be accepted, rejected, or suspended. One of the key points to this approach is that the rules can be really kind of changed on the fly, which means as trends change or as circumstances change, that the rules can be changed to address those changes. Card verification numbers is another technique that's commonly used. Approximately 75% of all merchants use the CVN method, which compares the verification number printed on the signature strip on the back of the card with the information on file with the cardholder's issuing bank. The problem with this is obviously if a fraudulent purchaser has the card physically in their possession or has had at some point in time, that number is obviously visible and they're able to observe that number themselves. Another technique is card association payer authentication services. This requires the cardholders to actually register with the systems and the merchants. And this is probably the reason that it hasn't been particularly successful, as it really kind of reduces the ease of use of the electronic form of payment. So it hasn't been widely adopted. The last approach that the book discusses is the use of negative lists. Approximately 40% of all merchants use negative lists, which is a file that includes customers' information such as their IP address or name, maybe their shipping and billing address, contact numbers, things like that, the status of that customer, and compares that to a file that they have on known customers that are known to be problem customers. And those that are flagged are then pulled aside and temporarily held up for further investigation. Section 10.3 talks about smart cards. A smart card looks like a plastic payment card, but it's distinguished by the presence of an embedded microchip. The embedded microchip may be a microprocessor combined with a memory chip, or just a memory chip with a non-programmable logic. Information on a microprocessor card can be added, deleted, or otherwise manipulated. A memory chip card is usually a read-only card similar to a credit card. Here in Exhibit 10.2 is an example of what a smart card might look like. If you look at it, it basically looks exactly like a credit card, a normal credit card might look. If the image were color, you'd be able to see where the arrow is pointing to is a little bit different. Usually it's going to look more metallic. It's almost going to have a copper look to it, or copper or goldish look to it, which allows it to actually be read and come into contact with readers. So when it comes to smart cards, there's essentially three components. There's the smart cards themselves, there's the smart card readers, and then there's the software. With respect to the smart cards themselves, there's basically two types of those. There's the kind that require contact and physical contact, and those that are referred to as contactless or proximity cards. Contact cards are pretty much what they sound like. They physically have to come into contact with a reader in order to be able to be read. This provides certain security positives, if you will, or pluses, if you will, because you physically have to have the card to be able to read it. Contactless cards or proximity cards are smart cards with an embedded antenna by means of which data and applications are passed to and from a card reader unit or other device without contact between the card and the card reader. In other words, they're able to be read from a distance. Usually it's a very short distance, but sometimes there's some concerns about just how short a distance that should be or how far it could be. Smart card readers are the devices that are used to actually read the data, read the content from the chips themselves, usually either after the card's been swiped or after it's been read from a distance if it's a proximity card. The smart card operating system is a special system that handles file management, security, input and output, and command execution, and provides an application programming interface for the smart card. In many parts of the world, smart cards are often used in place of or in addition to traditional credit or debit cards. They can be used for a variety of different purchases. Some of the main ones tend to be for retail purchases as well as for transit fares, but they also support things like non-retail as well as non-financial applications as well. One of the advantages of using smart cards for retail purchases includes security. It tends to be a more secure method of payment. Another benefit of smart cards versus standard payment cards is that they can be extended to other payment services as well. Smart cards are also used quite a bit in the transit area. For example, when you have to pay for things like parking, train rides, subways, buses, etc. Sometimes the combination of payments that are required using these various modes of transportation becomes kind of cumbersome. Some take cash, some take credit cards, some take debit cards. It's different from place to place. Smart cards can help to eliminate that inconvenience, and most major transit operators in the United States have implemented smart card fare ticketing systems. Stored valued cards are virtually indistinguishable from regular credit cards or debit cards. It's basically just a card that has monetary value loaded onto it, and it's usually rechargeable. The magnetic strip on the back is what actually holds the value of the currency that's on the card, and that's what distinguishes it from, say, a smart card. With smart cards, the value is actually stored on that chip. But it allows consumers to make purchases both online as well as offline in the same way they use credit or debit cards, relying on the same networks, encrypted communications, and electronic banking protocols, etc. What is different about stored value cards is that anyone can obtain one without regard to prior financial standing or having an existing bank account as collateral. So if you happen to have financial problems in the past, you can still use a stored valued card. There's a couple of different types of store value cards, closed loop and open loop. Closed loop are really kind of tied down to the merchant or merchant group that they're issued from. So it's very limited in where you can make purchases, obviously. Open loop are multi-purpose cards. And you see some of these put out by Visa and MasterCard, for example, that get used at a variety of different retailers and can be used at a lot of different places online as well as offline. Another form of payments are e-micropayments. Vendors who accept credit cards typically have to pay a minimum transaction fee that ranges anywhere from 25 cents to 35 cents, plus a percentage of, say, 2 or 3% of the purchase price. The same is true for debit cards, where the fixed transaction fees are larger even though there are no percentage charges. These fees are relatively insignificant for card purchases over $5, but when the charge is very small, it can really eat into your profit. Nevertheless, it's been shown that consumers are willing to use their cards or debit cards for purchases under $5, as evidenced by a number of studies that have been done. Currently, there's 5 basic micropayment models that do not depend solely on or directly on credit or debit cards, and that have enjoyed some amount of success. Aggregation refers to payments from a single consumer that are batched together and processed only after a certain amount of time, say a certain number of days, or a certain monetary threshold has been reached, say $20. The direct payment method uses micropayments that are added to a monthly bill for existing services, such as a phone bill. You see this a lot in the cellular phone business, where you might make small purchases and they're simply added to your cell phone bill at the end of the month. So rather than making those small individual payments, you simply pay it along with the rest of your phone bill. Stored value are upfront payments that are made to a debit account from which purchases are deducted as they are made. So the consumer deposits some money with the vendor, and then the money is deducted from that account as they make purchases. Subscriptions are a single payment subscriptions are when a single payment covers access to content for a defined period of time. And lastly, a la carte. Vendors process purchases as they occur and rely on the volume of purchases to negotiate lower credit and debit card processing fees. So they try to get down some of those percentages or the overall fees that are associated with each transaction based on volume. An e-check is the electronic version or representation of a paper check. The idea is that merchants hope that e-checks will raise sales by reaching consumers who do not have credit cards or who are unwilling to provide credit card numbers online. One of the advantages of e-checks is that it relies on current business and banking practices and can be used by any business that has a checking account, including small and mid-sized businesses that may not be able to afford other forms of electronic payments. Most businesses rely on third-party software to handle e-check payments, such as Fiserv, Chase Payment Tech, and Authorize.net. The next slide is going to show you the processing of e-checks in the United States. That all of this relies in the United States relies quite heavily on the ACH, or Automated Clearinghouse Network. The ACH network is a nationwide batch-oriented electronic funds transfer system that provides for the interbank clearing of electronic payments for participating financial institutions. Some of the benefits of e-check processing include reducing the merchant's administrative costs by providing faster and less paper-intensive collection of funds. It improves the efficiency of the deposit process for merchant and financial institutions. It speeds the checkout process for consumers. It provides consumers with more information about their purchases on their account statements, and it reduces the float period and the number of checks that bounce because of non-sufficient funds. So here you can see the slide I was referring to just a moment ago, in which you have both the consumer and the merchant attached to the internet conducting business, and they rely on a third party to be able to take care of the transactions of money and verification of payment and things of that nature. Still another form of payment is referred to as mobile payments. The term mobile payment refers to payment transactions initiated or confirmed using a person's cell phone or smartphone. Some of those purchases might include things like videos, music, ringtones, online game subscriptions, or other digital goods, transportation fares to the bus, subway, or train, parking meters, and again other services, maybe books, magazines, tickets, or other hard goods. A special classification, if you will, of mobile payments are mobile proximity payments. Proximity payments involve a special mobile phone equipped with an integrated chip or smart card, a specialized reader that recognizes the chip when the chip comes within a short distance of the reader, hence proximity, and a network for handling payment. Essentially, a buyer waves the specially equipped mobile phone near a reader to initiate a payment. It's a contactless payment, which we were talking about earlier, in which basically the phone doesn't have to physically come into contact with the reader. It simply has to be close enough or in the proximity of the reader. The payment could be deducted from a prepaid account or charged directly to a mobile phone or bank account. In the United States, mobile proximity payments have really only been used in a handful of pilot projects so far, though we are starting to see some expansion of that. Outside of the U.S., adoption of mobile contactless payments has been much broader. For example, in Japan, approximately 50 million customers of NIT Docomo use mobile phones for debit card transactions. In the future, they will also use them as credit cards. Interestingly, taxis in Japan, Germany, and other countries are starting to install wireless systems for receiving payments. A number of initiatives have been launched to support mobile remote payments. These initiatives offer services that enable clients and customers to pay their monthly bills, shop on the internet, transfer funds to other individuals, known as peer-to-peer payments, and top off their prepaid mobile accounts without having to purchase prepaid phone cards. In each of these cases, the underlying processes are basically the same and include the following steps. Number 1, the payer initiating the payment sets up an account with a mobile payment service provider. Number 2, the user selects an item to purchase. The merchant asks for a payment. Number 3, to make the payment, the payer sends a text message or a command to the MPSP that includes the dollar amount and the receiver's mobile phone number. Number 4, the MPSP receives the information and sends a message back to the payer, confirming the request and asking for the customer's PIN. Number 5, the payer receives the request on his or her mobile device and enters the PIN. Number 6, after the MPSP receives the payer's PIN, money is transferred to the receiver's account, credit card or bank account. The payer's account is debited. Number 7, after the transaction occurs, the payment information is sent to the payer's mobile device and his or her account at MPSP is debited. Similar steps are used to enable merchants or service providers the opportunity to conduct POS, point of sale, transactions without the need for special POS terminals. These payments have been labeled as mobile POS or mPOS transactions. With mPOS, the merchant utilizes a special mobile service to send a payment request from his or her mobile device to the customer's phone number. Once the request is received, the customer enters his or her PIN. At this point, the service sends a confirmation to both the merchant and the customer. The transactions are completed by debiting the customer's account and crediting the merchant's account. B2B payments are part of a much larger financial supply chain that includes procurement, contract administration, fulfillment, financing, insurance, credit ratings, shipment validation, order matching, payment authorization, remittance matching, and general ledger accounting. Unlike the physical supply chain, inefficiencies still characterize the financial supply chains of most companies. A number of factors create these inefficiencies, including the time required to create, transfer, and process paper documentation, the cost and errors associated with manual creation and reconciliation of documentation, the lack of transparency in inventory and cash positions when goods are in the supply chain, disputes arising from inaccurate or missing data, and fragmented point solutions that do not address the complete end-to-end processes of the trade cycle. The vast majority of B2B payments are still made by check, and the barriers to electronic payments remain essentially the same. IT and constraints posed by the difficulty of integrating various systems, the inability of trading partners to send and receive automated remittance information, and difficulty in convincing customers and suppliers to adopt electronic payments. However, there is some evidence that companies are beginning to move to B2B e-payments. Enter the world of enterprise invoice presentment and payment. This is the process by which companies present invoices and make payments to one another through the internet. For many firms, presentment and payment are costly and time-consuming. It can cost up to $15 to generate paper invoices and between $25 and $50 to resolve a disputed invoice. On the payment side, it takes 3 to 5 days for a check to arrive by mail. This means that millions of dollars of B2B payments are tied up in floats. This reduces the recipient's cash flow and increases the amount they must borrow to cover the float. In the same vein, manual billing and remittance can result in errors, which in turn can result in disputes that hold up payments. Given that most firms handle thousands of invoices and payments yearly, any reduction in time, cost, or errors can result in millions of dollars of savings. Improved cash flow, customer service, and data quality, along with reduced processing costs, are the primary reasons companies are turning to EIPP. Again, EIPP automates the workflow surrounding presentment and payment. Essentially, there's 3 basic models in which an EIPP system can be implemented with: seller direct, buyer direct, and consolidator. For seller direct, the solution links one seller to many buyers for invoice presentment. This model typically is used when there are pre-established relationships between the seller and its buyers. If a seller issues a large number of invoices or the invoices have a high value, then there can be a substantial payoff from implementing EIPP. For this reason, firms in the manufacturing, telecommunication, utilities, healthcare, and financial services industries use this model often. For the buyer direct model, there's one buyer for many sellers. This is kind of an emerging model, but it's based on the buyer's dominant position in the B2B transactions. Again, it's used when the buyer's purchases result in a high volume of invoices. Companies such as Walmart are in a strong position to institute buyer direct EIPPs. For the consolidator model, this is a many-to-many model in which the consolidator, acting as an intermediary, collecting or aggregating invoices from multiple sellers and payments from multiple buyers. Consolidators are generally third parties. This allows the model to eliminate the hassles associated with implementing and running an EIPP for the buyers and the sellers. The model has gained ground in industries where multiple buyers rely on the same suppliers. Once presentment is complete, payment needs to be done. In order to receive those payments, there's a number of different ways we can go about receiving the actual funds. The first is the ACH network. This is the same network that underlies the processing of e-checks that we talked about earlier, so it doesn't really warrant any additional discussion. There's P-cards, or purchasing cards, which are special purpose payment cards issued to a company's employees to be used solely for purchasing non-strategic materials and services up to a preset dollar limit. The idea is it gives employees an awful lot of flexibility to be able to make small purchases rather than having to go through a formal process to make very small purchases, which oftentimes cost more than the product, the good or service actually being purchased. Fedwire is basically just wire transfer. This is something that's supported by the U.S. Federal Reserve System, and it's typically used with large dollar amounts, where large dollar payments and time is a critical component in those transactions usually. Lastly, there are letters of credit for global payments. So this is basically just a written agreement by a bank to pay the seller on account of the buyer a sum of money upon presentation of certain documents. As far as some of the managerial issues for this chapter, we started out by talking about the fact that we're running an e-commerce business. It's a business just like any other business. We have to make money. And that's what this chapter is really about, is how do we go about collecting money. So some of those issues include what payment methods should your B2C site support? Who are your customers going to be? And that's going to help to dictate some of those choices. What e-micropayment strategy should your e-marketplace support? Again, that depends on your e-commerce site, what type of product or service that you're selling. If it's a small dollar item, maybe micropayments make sense. If they're large dollar items, maybe not. What payment methods should the C2C marketplace support? Should we outsource our payment gateway service? How secure are e-payments? Some consumers are very concerned about releasing credit card information across the internet. How do we instill confidence in those purchasers or in those customers that their payments, that their credit card information and financial information that's going across the internet is going to be safe? And lastly, what B2B payment methods should we use? So after reading this chapter, you should have an understanding of what the payment revolution is. You should have an understanding of what using payment cards online is all about. You should know what smart cards are and be able to compare them against more normal or common forms of payment. You should understand what stored value cards are and e-micropayments. You should also know about e-checking and mobile payments. And lastly, we finished up talking about B2B electronic payments, and so you should have an idea of some of the issues that go along with that. This concludes Chapter 10, Electronic Commerce Payment Systems. Thank you very much.